Hello there. I will guide you through the vast landscape called hardstyle, so you can finally be the nerd who, the next time you're clubbing, shouts in your mate's ear the history and importance of this track for the scene and as a whole. Okay, but let me start off addressing exactly you, already pounding into the comments that putting music into boxes hurts the art and that genres and subgenres are an artificial construct without any point. You are right. You're probably someone belonging to the scene for quite some time. Yeah, this video is probably not catered for exactly you. But do you remember when you first heard a distinct sound and wondered how to find more of this? In my eyes, this is the big main reason to even invent boxes of genres like that. Being able to put a finger on it and after the fact being able to find more of this. So if you're pretty new to the scene, heard a sound you liked, and wondered what it's called and how to find more, I think you've clicked on the right video. Regarding my point a second ago, that this concept of genres and thinking in boxes hurts the art. If you actually think inside these boxes, it's hard to actually overcome its borders. You see, if artists and producers think in subgenres, the music really cannot evolve outside of it and will start to sound the same. You have to forget boundaries and you have to start to experiment with sounds outside of your safe space to push this music further and further. If no one ever done that, hardstyle would be dead by now. You have to. The pure thought of subgenres hinders evolution. Also, it's by the way pretty hard to visualize these subgenres, cause some overlap quite a lot, some are a direct evolution of one another. The boundaries are pretty fluid sometimes, and this is all really subjective. So just don't get it twisted, please. Just because you think that Martin Garrix makes Rawstyle doesn't mean that I also think that he does. And just because I label Radical Redemption as Rawstyle doesn't mean you have to do the same. Got it? Are we on the same page here? Okay, let's finally start with the beginning. Okay, it's the year 2000. A lot of clubs in the Netherlands host underground parties for hardcore for gabbaheads, who stomp the dance floor in their Nikes until the early mornings in a mixture of smoke from cigarettes and fog from fog machines. Pupils probably as big as coins. This scene existed for a while already as a direct counter-movement to the likes of Blümchen, Marusha and other well-known happy hardcore artists. Okay, so we have a fast, dark and underground sounds for a few years. Some of these artists making this kind of hardcore, called gabba, started to experiment by slowing down the tempo. And yeah, hardstyle was born. The term early hardstyle obviously got invented later. These guys in the year 2000 didn't think like, I just invented a new genre, let's call it early hardstyle. Nah bro, that's not how this shit works. Bruh. Not even the term hardstyle was invented back then. I think that came around in 2002 or 2003. But yeah, you might recognize a few names responsible for these experiments, which ultimately led to hardstyle being born. Ever heard of Lady Dana? Luna? Deepak? Or a really small name probably no one's remembering, like The Prophet? All of these guys made underground hardcore at the time. Early hardstyle took influence mainly from gabba, but also from hard trance and acid house. This invention of a new sound happened over time, like I said. It's not really clear what track was the exact first one, but many people would agree that this one is at least one of the first and maybe the most important one from that time, released in 2001. Let's go. Quick side note, yes, this track was Italian. Italy and Netherlands played a huge role together in the creation of this style. Nowadays, hardstyle is widely known as Dutch, and that's because all important festivals happen in the Netherlands pretty much. But the artists actually producing this music back in the days were either Dutch or Italian, and no for the most part. Okay, but going back to this track though for a second, notice the reverse bass here. Let's go. This kick drum was the sound of early hardstyle pretty much and still can be found today in some ways or another. I may deep dive into technicalities in another video at some point if you like, so yeah, let me know if you want that in the comments below. So just to keep it as short as possible, we have a slower tempo, talking like 140, 145 BPM, and yeah, these reverse basses. And by the way, there was one big party of one big organizer pushing this sound to the masses. You might have heard of it.
Welcome at Climax.
Climax, organized of course by Q-Dance, started in 2001. obviously as a relatively small party at first, but it kinda grew quickly, and in 2003 it was already held at the legendary Dome, where it's still being held today. High attendees in numbers as well as high as a kite themselves too, probably, actually set the stone for this music to flourish. Dutch smoke weed. Labels like the legendary Scantrax and Fusion Records, as well as all the Sci-Fi labels which came out of Italy, played a massive role in pushing the sound further and further. The sound evolved more and more, producers started to actually implement simple melodies and do more than just place reverse basses on end, until one day, in the studios of Fusion Records in 2005, a group of highly talented individuals turned a few knobs a bit differently, and suddenly a new sound was born, which catapulted hardstyle into something else completely. Yeah, and off we go into the Nustyle era. Donkey Rollers already invented that kind of kick in 2002 and incorporated it in the track but they just left it there and didn't pitch it. Now listening back to Immeasurably once again, you can hear the kick drum changing its pitch or its tonal information in support of the melody. Okay, so not only did the kick drums sound completely different in Nustyle, the tempo increased to 150 BPM and kick pitching was invented, which led to hardstyle starting to sound more melodic than before. A lot more melodic. Yeah, and this is the first real point in time where within the scene, people started to fight wars. It splitted the scene into two camps basically. One camp didn't want to let go of the sound of the now older era just yet. Others embraced the new sound, which actually was kinda different suddenly. Q-Dance, labels and other organizers though held the name Hardstyle pretty strong in their hands, and well, the marketing for it worked, so it's all still known as Hardstyle today basically. And they started to push the more melodic side of it by a lot. The dust began to settle, and we entered this new era with kinda cringy names, ravers pants, lasers and energy drinks and fishing videos. I mean, even the term Nustyle itself causes my fingernails and toenails to just curl up. Important names for the scene today made their entrances back in the days like 2005 and 2006. Headhunterz, Wildstylez, Noisecontrollers, Technoboy. I mean, we all know these names, of course, but like, just step out of it for 1 second and enjoy these names without context, man. Bruh. While their music manifested hardstyle as something hugely recognizable and loved by many, their naming skills aged like milk though. Scantrax roots forever as one, S is lava, hair is for losers. Unfortunately, this trend ended quickly, but when artists got known in this era of pure edginess, they stuck with their names obviously, so these guys are kinda scarred because of that. I'm not sure if I would still be like to called anal I gotta be honest, probably not though. Okay, so this era, apart from the thing with naming stuff, is oftentimes referred to the golden era of hardstyle. No one took himself too serious. Zany and MCDV8 covered Metallica without clearing the sample. Showtek were the most popular guys of hardstyle while giving finger to the system. Headhunterz wanted you to repeat his name for some reason. And Mr. Puta liked to puff his green stuff.
That's the kind of shit I want to blow.
What started as a niche scene with subpar production evolved into something more established and increased a lot in quality. Yeah, again, not to delve too deep into technicalities, but the actual production of such a hardstyle kick is really specific and also pretty complicated. The kicks got cleaner and overall more potent over time in the years up until 2010. Important moments were the album of D-Block and Estefan's Music Made Addicts in 2009, and of course, the probably best album in hardstyle like ever, Headhunterz and Wildstylez Project 1 in 2008. Damn, anyone remembering the Rate Reducer remix?
Release Project 1.
The shit was so hype back in the days at festivals. This Hardkick 10 sample ruled the fucking world. It was just so beautiful. So vocally, hardstyle began to sound more poppy too. which, of course, resulted in a huge backlash within the community again. The first full singing vocal in a hardstyle track, as far as I know, was Technoboy's Into Deep in 2006 already. Kinda forward thinking, because this sing-along festival hardstyle was getting huge in like 2010 and got increasingly unpopular in the scene, with Brendan Hart riding this wave as good as he can while being hated in forums, but being everyone's guilty pleasure.
Sorry to say, but this has the same sound, the same feeling, and the same everything, like every other new style crap that comes out today.
I couldn't get enough of the Wildstylez and SMD remix of Just As Easy, but couldn't tell anyone, cause you're supposed to not like this stuff. Man, the whole scene was in puberty back then. But the hate, or the force against a style like this, actually had a fair point. If we take a quick gander at dubstep, or brostep rather, brostep adapted to what the world wanted it to be. It lived through a huge but short hype phase and is pretty much dead by now. The hardstyle scene wanted to avoid following the footsteps of it, so as a result, a counter movement to the mainstream and the sing-along tracks emerged. Okay, so help me out here. What is the opposite of poppy vocals, bouncy pitched kicks, and beautiful melodies? Right.
Sit the fuck down and shut the fuck up!
Harder kicks, spoken evil vocals, and melodies which were either really simple and dark, or just non-existing. Oh, and screeches, man. A lot of screeches.
Let's do it!
This track defined first and foremost the term Rawstyle and manifested into their brains, but obviously this track itself doesn't really come close to the Rawstyle we know today. While all other steps in the evolution of hardstyle before were always exactly that, a step of evolution, always more or less replacing the style which existed before, or at least push it aside. Rawstyle though was a movement not replacing the other style for a change. The scene actually started to split in 2010 for good, and this split is still here today. The colorful and melodic hardstyle got renamed after some time to Euphoric Hardstyle. Yeah, we will have a look into this in a second, but first let's talk about Raw real quick. So, Rawstyle started to identify itself with anticlimaxes. A climax is considered the part of a track where the melody plays together with the kick drum, the main part of a track so to speak. Everything builds up towards this part. A track with an anticlimax in place of a climax, however, acts like it has a normal climax, but when that part drops, it drops not with a melody, but with something else, and most likely with a hard kick staying on one note and screeches on top. The first real anticlimax used in the context of Rawstyle probably was Max Enforcer's anthem for the sensation Black in 2010, Fade to Black. Names like B-Front, Randy, E-Force, and probably the most influential project at that time, Guns for Hire, got famous for their dark sound, and they pushed Rawstyle further and further.
Plata o plomo.
Yeah, for a few guys, this evolution actually provided a breeding ground to incorporate early hardstyle into their productions once again. Labels like Spoontech, Theracords, and Nutty Tracks with names like Vazard, Deejay Thera, Delete, and of course Nutty T started releasing a sound which was as underground as it gets. So Rawstyle, since its birth, had also like two faces, one dark and atmospheric one and one really underground, but both pretty much evil. Again, the boundaries between all of these were not really clear cut. And once again, the community went to war with this, especially with the new sound, the one not connected to the early hardstyle that much. Because the golden era of Nustyle a few years before actually improved a lot in regards of quality in the years 2008 and 2009. The scene was kinda spoiled in that regard. Rawstyle now though seemed really simple. Just put your heaviest kick into it, play a simple random melody and drop with an anticlimax.
Fuck this place!
Also, just find any evil sounding vocal telling no matter what.
Good soup.
While Nustyle evolved into something mature, like a teenager addicted to Red Bull starts to drink coffee. Like Rawstyle in the beginning was a teenager addicted to Monster Energy and Razer keyboards and mices. With Nustyle fans gatekeeping the newer and harder sound. Well, as you probably can imagine, gatekeeping was everyone's main hobby. Everyone was guilty of this, including me. Rawstyle evolved by itself though over time too. Frontliner and B-Front's Magic was one of the, or probably the most, noteworthy stepping stone for the Rawstyle we know today. Chain Reaction, the record-breaking, pushed the boundaries technically. And 2014 saw the first proper Rawstyle track on the #1 spot in the Q-Dance Top 100 of the year. And of course, it was... This track is over 7 years old now. Feeling old yet? So with the rise of E-Force, Warface, Radical Redemption and others, Rawstyle moved away further from the more traditional hardstyle and actually increased a lot in regards of quality once again. There was quite a lot of movement too, especially with Extra Raw, but we might dig into this at a later video though. While in the beginning of the 2010s, Rawstyle rose in popularity and became a staple in the scene, what exactly happened with Euphoric Hardstyle though? Well, the split between Raw and Euphoric wasn't too apparent at first. The split was slow but steadily moving. Euphoric Hardstyle producers started to experiment by themselves too, namely Noisecontrollers pushed the technical boundaries a lot with the Gimme Love kick, so Euphoric kept it fresh as well. With Headhunterz leaving the hardstyle scene for a while to do Big Room in 2014, and T-Block and Estefan following him 2 years later, Euphoric never died but lost a bit of popularity also due to the surge of Rawstyle producers like really pushing the sound into the foreground. And now the split was pretty apparent. In 2014, tracks like Noisecontrollers, Down Down were placed #2 behind the aforementioned E47. In 2015, place 3 was regained with Broken, and place 2, Atmospheres' Release. The #1 spot, by the way, was this year's Defcon 1 anthem by Randy, No Gods No Glory, which actually tried to combine both styles a bit, but for sure was a modern take on Euphoric in my eyes. Yeah, this comparison to #3 or 2 ain't that shocking, so I compared #3 to #2, so fucking sue me. The only thing I want to get across here is that in these times, the top 100 of the year had like everything, sing-along tracks with beautiful melodies, next to nasty kicks and screeches. With the comeback of Headhunterz in 2017, yes, his comeback is almost 5 years old now, Euphoric saw itself getting back on track. Headhunterz' Destiny on #1 and Randy's Zombie on #2 in 2017. 2018 now saw both styles and hardstyle combining again a bit. Randy always tried to combine a rawer sound to his Euphoric productions, but with the release of the collab of the year, Headhunterz and Sub-Zero Project, Rawstyle got widely accepted throughout the whole scene because Raw proved to be able to fuse well with Euphoric now. So talking about the last few years, or maybe even today, Euphoric actually adapted well to Rawstyle with the addition of heavier hitting kicks in now almost every release. Take the producer Reborn for example, a staple of Euphoric Hardstyle. Take note of his kick. Also, Rawstyle evolved quite a lot to what we know now. In Rawstyle, the usage of multiple amount of kicks got prevalent, Disturb and Warface probably coming to mind first in that regard, and nowadays, like every Raw track includes a fake drop and a shitload of kick rolls, so every drop hits like a truck full of dildos basically. So in conclusion, hardstyle got more and more popular over the years, with the biggest DJs now including hardstyle tracks in their sets, well, and even hardstyle DJs playing at peak times on the Tomorrowland main stage before the pandemic. But also, hardstyle actually got harder in the last years, with Euphoric adapting to Rawstyle a bit, and Rawstyle itself getting harder like every day, probably a result of the scene trying to avoid the path of brostep, I think. Well, and the masses probably also like to have their faces peeled in front of the speakers. Fair enough. And this is where we are today. But there are a lot of questions still unanswered. Looking back, we didn't even talk about the sub-genres. Extra Raw, Big Room Hardstyle, do you remember Dubstyle? Undersound? Tech Style? What the fuck were these? And also, hardstyle ain't an island all by itself. Other genres also took a piece of the cake. So how did hard trance play a role here? Tech? What the fuck was subground and the cult era, and how does all of this compare to hardcore? I think this warrants a second episode, and by far the most interesting question of all, where does hardstyle evolve into next? Comment down below what you think hardstyle will sound like in the next years. Like this video if you've enjoyed, and stick around if you want to see more. See you then, bye!